Hi everyone, welcome back to Eat, Sleep, Boxing, Repeat. I am delighted this morning to be joined by Owen McKendry and Elliott Grigg. This is a special feature where we are going to talk about a certain subject, that subject being who will be the top heavyweight in 5 years' time from now. First of all, Owen, Elliott, thank you so much for joining me, guys. How are we? Owen, I'll start with you.
Pleasure as always, mate. Interesting subject that is turning out to be a lot harder, and in a sense not as broad as I expected.
Yes.
I totally agree with what Owen's saying. Initially, you look at it and you think, oh, yeah, bang, that person. But then the more you dig into it, the harder it is. And we are going to dig into it, isn't that correct? So, yeah, thanks for having us, Greg. And yeah, looking forward to it, mate.
Excellent, guys. Thank you very much for coming on this morning. I agree. The very, very small, brief chat we had before recording, we all kind of came together and we were like, this is actually a lot harder than we thought it was. So looking forward to getting into it. So, guys, let's keep it nice and basic. Our current heavyweight world champions at the moment, we've got Alexander Usyk. We've got, if we're looking at lineal WBC, Tyson Fury. It's still a bit up in the air, but we're assuming that he's coming back. Both of those guys at the moment. So Alexander Usyk, I believe, is he 35? Mm-hmm. Tyson Fury, 31, 32, 32, 33?
Around that mark, yeah.
Yeah, so first of all, Owen, what's your thoughts on this subject? I know that you have had a little look into things before we came, boys, tactics there.
Fury's the only one that's bugging my mind because I don't see any current champion between, realistically, Usyk and then in champion in terms of the number one contenders who will be fighting for titles. I don't see any of them potentially even being contenders in 5 years' time. Fury, we don't even know what he's doing now. So to say what he'll be doing in 5 years is impossible. He'll probably still be fighting, but he'll probably try and fight Derek Chisora again in 5 years. Usyk, definitely not. He's already mentioned he wants another crack at the cruiserweight, taking all the bouts again at cruiserweight. So I think Usyk's he's 20-0. I think he's got 5 fights left in him. I don't see any more than 5. I see the unification for undisputed at heavyweight, step back down to cruiserweight, clean up again, and ride off into the sunset. So it's a really difficult subject because a lot of the current crop of top, even normally you'd say 15, but even the top 20, 25, top 30 heavyweights, they're aging quite a lot. And like we mentioned in the chat before, a key thing to mention is the Lucas Brown thing, where he, at his age, which is 42 or 43, he's been rejected by the British Board of Control, that he's not allowed to fight. So when you look at the current crop of heavyweights, if there's a British world champion, say AJ, Joe Joyce, for example, are they going to be allowed to fight these guys? Would Joe Joyce be allowed to fight? Would it be sanctioned? So it's a really tough subject. And I think out of the current crop of top 15, unless someone like AJ decides to carry on fighting and Fury decides he's going to retire 7 times and come back 7 times in the next 5 years, I personally don't see many of the current crop of top heavyweights at all, but still even being active.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great point, Owen. And I'm really interested in the point you made about Lucas Brown. I would like to look into that more and find out why, because my understanding is Lucas Brown's coming off of a decent win. Yes,
he's not junior far out.
He's been poleaxed a few times now, but most heavyweights, when they start to lose it a bit, yeah, that can happen. So interesting stuff, and that's one that I think when we come off, I'm going to have a wee bit more of a look into that. Elliott, any of the top guys, top 15, top 20, you can see still being there? 2007?
Let me have a look. I mean, we can probably, I don't want to put any more work onto the graphics guys here, but if we just, I'll go through a couple of ages. Maybe we can ping this up in a table at the end of the video or in the comments. But you guys at home can add 5 to these ages. I'm not going to do the work for you. So these are the current ages. You can add 5, see how they are in 5 years' time. But so Usyk, 35, Fury 34, Joshua 32, Wilder 36, Royce 37, Andrew Reese 33, Dillian White 34. So yeah, I mean, obviously those guys. Out of all those, if you just take that's the kind of, I think, the ring top 10 as they're written down, without Sanchez at 30 and Hrgovic at 30 as well. Fury, again, like Owen said, is the enigma for me because I think 5 years he's 39. I mean, like we said, like we saw Klitschko take on Joshua at 42. I just think the difficulty really is obviously Fury saying he's struggling to let go of it, etc., which I can kind of understand. But equally, the way he fights, the style he has, can I see him sort of jumping around and jabbing for sort of 12 rounds again at that age? Probably not. To be honest, I mean, he's obviously a big man as well. Like at some point, he's going to slow. But equally, I could see him fighting at that age. I'm just not sure I can see him being heavyweight champion at that age if he did continue. Usyk, no, I agree with Owen. No chance. I think he said, well, initially, like he wanted 3 fights, didn't he, at heavyweight? Talked about that kind of exhibition with Alvarez as well. Just basically getting money. I think, to be honest, the only real fight out there for him really is the Fury fight. Maybe he can have, if he wants to go down to cruiser, fair enough, but I don't also see that as being necessary. Don't see him being there in 5 years. Yeah. Joshua's tough because Joshua will be 37, which is only 2 years older than Usyk now. And you sit there going, he's tied into that deal, isn't he, with DAZN for a while. Mm-hmm. And then you almost feel like he's going to be going, I think, to at least 35. So then you're looking at it going, if there's belts out there for him, can he? And then I look at the guys that are coming through. There'll be some tough fights for Joshua down there, but equally, despite what happened with Usyk, there's no shame in losing there. I can potentially see him still being active. It's just again a question of whether he's at the top end. Joyce obviously no, Ruiz no, White no. So yeah, I think for me, out of those guys that are currently active, potentially Fury, but not at the top, and AJ being a bit of an unknown. Is kind of how I'm seeing it, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, so what I've picked up from you two guys' responses, I think Owen makes a great point about Lucas Brown and the age disparity. Elliott, with you, the AJ point you made there, I don't even know if you realise how great a point you made there. AJ's got that deal with DAZN. Now, I'm not 100% the ins and outs, but is it not something like 10 fights? Is there not? It's quite an exclusive deal where I don't know if there's a time frame in it, but I think he's tied in for quite a bit with DAZN because a lot of money. So really great points there, guys. I think there's a few things to digest there and maybe go away and have a think about. Before we come to our conclusion of who we think is going to be number 1 in 5 years' time, I want to talk about some of the British guys. First of all, I just want to move on from that subject and say I totally agree with you. I don't think any of the top 15 or 20 will be. I think, like you guys said, maybe AJ. All depends. Tyson Fury. I don't know if Tyson Fury knows what he's doing tomorrow, never mind in 5 years. So, yeah, very interesting stuff. I want to look at the British scene. Is there anyone that you guys think that is maybe going to come through that could put a dent in 5 years' time? I've got two names that I want to run by you guys. One of them, I would not blame the listeners for maybe going, well, that's about out there, but we need to look at ages. We need to look at people improving. First one is one maybe won't surprise people. We've got Solomon Dakis. He is with Matchroom at the moment. He's 28. He's 5-0. He's only going to be 33 in 5 years' time. But the one that interests me, now this is the wild card, and I'm going to throw this one out there. And I want to hear both of your guys' thoughts on it. Johnny Fisher is only 23, right? Johnny Fisher is only 23 and he's had 6 fights. Now, complete novice. I think basically what I want to say on that is, and I know it's a touchy subject considering everything that's happened at the moment, do you guys remember Conor Ben's first few fights and then the level Conor Ben's at now? We'll leave that there. I'll not go too much into it, but he was a massively improved fighter. Yeah, so it's one to maybe look at. But is there anyone on the British scene that you guys can see come through? Elliott, I want to talk to you first because your eyes nearly rolled out your head there. I'm very keen to hear your thoughts on the subject.
I just wanted to, you said off air that you had a name that people would know, but that you weren't going to reveal. And when you did reveal it, my eyes did roll a bit there. But it's like the reason is not because I agree with you in the fact that Fisher's obviously learning on the job like a complete novice, and he's obviously still very young, so he's got plenty of time to kick on. Same with Solomon Dakis. But the reason I was kind of a bit uncertain about that is just the fact that I was looking at other British guys. You've got Daniel Dubois, only 25. And like you've obviously got people like, I mean, even Hughie. Like, this is going to be a one as well that people's eyes are going to roll up. But Hughie Fury's only 28, and he's been in. And if he can get fit again, he's been in there with some very good names, and is also a tough night. I mean, people have criticised him for not being a great watch, but he's a tough night for anyone. So I'm sitting there going, on the British scene, would I back Fisher to beat either of those guys? I mean, potentially Fury, but I think Dubois as well, the way he fights, it's hard at the moment. I mean, like we say, 5 years time, get crystal ball out sort of thing, but it's hard to see how that fight would go. I think if Dubois can kind of get back, at least in confidence, and at least in, he's obviously got the attributes, power and speed to cause problems. He'll be only 30. So for me, I don't think it's necessarily a terrible shout. I just think it's hard for me to put it beyond that Daniel Dubois sort of at that stage.
I'll give you a curveball, Elliott. The reason I'm coming up with those names, Daniel Dubois and Hughie Fury, over the next 5 years are going to be in massive fights now. So 5 years' time, are they going to have some wheels taken away from them? Are they going to have stopped a few times? Are they going to have fights against guys like AJ, like Fury, where they're going to have a lot of miles on the clock? 5 years and you think, oh, well, Daniel Dubois is only 25. But where I'm coming from with this is guys who aren't going to have too many miles on the clock in 5 years' time have learning fights. For 1 minute, if you ask me, if you put Johnny Fisher in with Daniel Dubois tomorrow, I think we know how that's going to go, But it's just a matter of thinking ahead and thinking of the fights that these guys could be in. So
I think what the great thing about Fisher actually would be, though, in my mind as well, is with the fan base he's got, that he's going to get the opportunities. Whereas some of the other guys we're going to look at, who are possibly Eastern European fighters, aren't going to get that same opportunity unless they put more miles on their clock and unless they do something kind of semi-outrageous. So I think, to be honest with you, if they can kind of fast track, almost on the Dave Allen pathway, they can fast track Fisher. He will get an opportunity if he goes sort of 15-0. I think I could see him kind of stepping, almost like they were going to try and do with Dubois, I suppose, before Joyce got to him, like Joyce has now got a couple of like stepping stones and straight into it. So I see what you're saying. Actually, they will be in hard fights, then there will be miles on the clock, and we've seen Dubois taking a big injury young already. Fury's obviously got his health problems already. I'd like to put another name possibly in there over 5 years, someone that hasn't got many miles on the clock but is showing ability, and that's Martin Bakole. Like, he'll be in some big fights potentially coming through, but again, it's that thing of opportunity. Who's fighting? Who could fight him? He might have miles on the clock. He might not. He might be avoided. So those names for me on that British scene is a very interesting kind of grouping that we've got there.
No, very interesting stuff. You make great points, Elliott. Owen, I'm very keen. I can see that smile there. I know that you've.
I think Bakole is the only one really, because I think Dubois, they try to skip the stepping stones with Joe Joyce. Didn't work out. Was a tough night for him. He's come back to WBA regular. I think people say AJ is a bit like Frank Bruno. I think Dubois is almost a carbon copy of Frank Bruno. You look at him, you look at his style. Probably a bit harsh at times, but the Frank Bruno lacking the killer instinct of jumping on his opponents when they're hurt. I think Dubois has that element to his game. So Dubois is a really tough one. Solomon Dacrez, at this moment in time, I've got to disagree, because when I watched him in Nottingham against Bracamonte, if Bracamonte was, I know it sounds stupid, but if he weren't 300 and whatever pound, I think he'd have stopped Dacrez. He was hurting him. It was definitely a learning curve for Dacrez. I think more positive than negative, but is a massive learning curve, because Bracamonte hurt him at times, and Bracamonte was landing shots that he should not be landing at his size, his style of fighter. I think Bakole is the most likely, but my issue with Bakole is his marketing his PR is quite poor. Outside of the hardcore boxing fans, even within Britain, I don't think many people know who Martin Bakole is. He's got a good record. I'm pretty sure it's 18-1. But he just doesn't seem to have the marketing. No, he should be promoted as this vicious puncher. He's a big heavyweight. He's coming for everyone. He's coming for all the bouts. He's a human wrecking ball, that type of thing. Like, he has had no PR really at all, bar his trainer saying how good he is, what he's like in sparring, what people don't get to see. So I think the British one's a tough one, to be fair. I don't think we've got any elite heavyweights. It may be something in 5 years' time I'll come to regret to say, but at present, I don't think we have any elite. I think Fraser Clark, obviously, he's not young. Father Time will catch up with Fraser Clark if he doesn't get fast-tracked sooner or later. He's got to follow Joe Joyce's path. And if he doesn't get the big wins in his 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th fights, I don't see Fraser Clark doing much. But again, another interesting point off the back of that is a lot of the heavyweights turning pro now are towards their 30s, late 20s, early 30s. I don't know what it is, why it is, but it's appearing more and more often now that they're having longer amateur careers. And
Yeah,
especially when you're putting miles on the clock at amateur, I think people don't realise that's why certain unbelievable amateurs turn pro and it doesn't
yeah,
work out for them. They've already got a lot of miles on the clock. They've been punched in the head a lot of times. And at heavyweight or even super heavyweight in the amateurs, if you have a lot of amateur at that weight, it's going to take its toll on you. And it's going to get to a point where if you don't hit the ground running in the professional ranks, you'll just get left behind. So, bar Bacoli, personally, I don't see any top level heavyweights. I think Johnny Fisher is the interesting one because he could be anything. He's
yeah,
learning on the job. Like you say, Conor Benn's the most perfect example. Johnny Fisher could, as he gets more confident, finds his feet within the pro ranks, he could just start bombing everyone out. You know,
yeah,
it's a learning curve. He's going to be a bit hesitant at times. He needs to find his feet, see what he's good at, see what he doesn't like, and then he could just decide to go knock everyone out. So Johnny Fisher is, I think, is a good shout. Actually, I think
yeah.
he'll definitely be above British level, and then we see how high his ceiling is once he gets to that level. So yeah, Dakraz at this moment in time, I'm unsure of due to the 312 pound Bracamonte. Um, but yeah, Bacoli, great shout again. But I don't think we're blessed at the moment with coming through the ranks. We've got what we've got within the pro ranks, but I don't think there's too much coming through.
Yeah, I think you make a really good points there. And you know, when I gave those two names, especially Solomon Dacres, I'm not sitting here thinking, yeah, that guy's a mega great chance. But
Mm-hmm.
we look at different weight classes. You'll get your fighters like Ricky Hatton, for example. He went life and death with John Thaxton. He went life and death at times with Eamon McGee. 10 fights later, he's bullying. So these guys, they can learn on the job. They can go through these learning curves. But at this moment in time, I think that's where the three of us came together this morning. And we just thought, this is really hard because you just don't know. A crystal ball stuff. So really interesting stuff, guys. What I want to do now is I want to look at who is going to be our number one. This is the one. This is the one that we've all came together for. We've got a few guys. I've had a look at myself.
Mm-hmm.
I've looked at the amateur rankings. We know that Julio Cesar de la Cruz is unanimously regarded as number one. He's had about 300 fights. I think he's won about 280 of them, but he's 33. So, like you said, the points you made on, it's highly unlikely. So, we know that there's big talk about Jared Anderson coming through, who is under top rank. He's 22 years old. He's at 12 fights. But I'm going to give you guys my number one, and then I want to hear about who you guys think it's going to be. So, for me, he's currently 28. He's 11-0. And I just think if he's kept active, I see him going through everyone.
This is mine as well. This is mine.
He is 6'7", and for me, it would be Bakir Jalilov. I think he is the guy that I'm looking at. He could really take over if he is managed correctly. Okay, so as you know, the number one that I feel will be Bakir Jalilov. Owen, I want to come to you now. I want to hear your thoughts on who you believe will be number one at the heavyweight tree in 5 years' time.
So I did have Jalilov written down. So that's a full house there on Jalilov. I think he's an animal. And there's a lot to like about him, but I think Jared Anderson. I've got a few written down. I've got Makhmudov. His first name's a mission to pronounce, and I don't want to get it wrong. I did have Ivan Daichko, who was 9-0, big Ukrainian fella who seems to have just stalled. I don't really know what's happened to his career, but he did seem there was a lot of positives. He sparred AJ, he sparred Vlad, and he come out with good kudos out of those. I think he sparred Wilder as well. But I think Jared Anderson, he's with Top Rank. You've already got the likes of Fury spouting his name about unbelievable PR. I just think from what I've seen from him so far, personally, I think Anderson will be number one. I think he can box, he can punch. He's a bit of a nightmare to face, but again, it's the old cliche of how will he be managed. But I do think I can see why he's highly regarded. Didn't have the most amateur experience. Another that's sort of learning on the job.
Yeah.
Is an American national winner type thing, a couple of occasions, but not like your Fraser Clarks and your Joe Joyces and whatnot from Britain who have done a lot amateur wise and then gone pro. So yeah, I think Jared Anderson personally will be number one.
That's excellent. That that was another name that I had down myself, as I said earlier. It's that crystal ball. 5 years time, where are these guys going to be? But you have to look at age, you have to look at experience, what they've had. So really great point, Owen. Elliott, I'm going to come to you. I believe that we may have a similar interest there as well. But yes, I want to hear your rationale behind that.
Yeah, no. So I fully agree with you with the Jalilov shout. 28 years old, very hard to look beyond this, look beyond him. I had other names. I had just even like guys I was sort of looking around, around the different bodies. Even Caballero was undefeated at 30. Just looking at whether guys like that could even come on. Sanchez is 30. Did he come on as well? But I just think when you look at it, I think Jalilov's got everything to blow through that division. The only thing, like you said, actually, Greg, as well, which would hold me back slightly, is that sense of who's going to want to fight him, who's going to actually want to take that, unless he forces his way into a mandatory position and then gets a belt that way. Because I almost feel like with those guys coming from those sort of regions, almost like Usyk to a degree, you have to do something kind of outstanding before you even get these sort of big marquee fights. But for me, on paper, I can't really look beyond that. I mean, him and obviously, like I say, him and Bacoli from Britain, moving at a sort of similar age at a similar time, both who sort of wants them. But I just think, I think Jalilov for me, like we said, Dubois 25, he could come on in 5 years' time. But I just think if he comes up against like someone like Jalilov, like you say, 11 wins, 11 KOs, I find it for size, power, just find it very hard to see him stopping. But Jared Anderson's also a very good shout as well. Someone I had written down as well. But for me, I'm going with you, Greg, on Jalilov.
Going with Jalilov. Guys, amazing stuff. I wouldn't say I'm surprised, but the fact that we all agreed on Jalilov, I was wondering if you guys would maybe look that far down and remember some of the previous conversations we've had. So it's unanimous. We all kind of feel Jared Anderson, or we feel Bakhtir Jalilov. Elliott, Owen, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me this morning. What a subject, guys. Who will be the top heavyweight in 5 years' time? Take care, and we'll be back to speak to you guys again soon. Thank you.